A stranger tried to force a woman out of her airplane's seat, but the moment the flight crew stepped in, the situation took a turn no one on that plane was ready for. This is not the kind of story people forget. And what happened here started long before anyone realized things were about to explode. Maya Thompson breathed out slowly as she settled in her window seat on a Boeing 737 preparing for a cross-country flight. She had chosen that seat days in advance. She paid extra for it without hesitation because the window made her feel grounded. It gave her a sense of peace she rarely found during travel. Today she needed that peace more than ever. Her carry-on bag was tucked neatly under the seat. Her headphones were around her neck. A new mystery novel rested in her lap. She had planned this flight as a small escape, a pocket of quiet before a stressful week ahead. The plane buzzed with the usual boarding chaos. People shuffled past her, bumping armrests. Overhead bins opened and slammed shut. A blend of perfume, jet fuel, and recycled air drifted through the cabin. Flight attendants moved down the aisle at a fast but controlled pace, answering questions and guiding passengers with practiced patience. Maya clicked her seatbelt into place and opened her book. She tried to immerse herself in the first page. The steady rhythm of conversations around her helped her settle. She felt the familiar comfort of being tucked away beside the window, a world where she could watch clouds drift by without interruption. But then someone's shadow blocked her light. She glanced up and saw a man standing in the aisle beside her row. He was tall, sharp-featured, and dressed far too formally for a domestic flight. His shirt looked freshly ironed. His dark brown hair was perfectly parted. His posture carried an effortless authority, the kind that made people step aside without thinking. Beside him stood a little boy clutching a toy dinosaur. The boy looked no older than 7. His shoulders were small and tense. His eyes darted around the cabin as if waiting for something bad to happen. Before Maya could greet them or even offer a polite smile, the man spoke in a tone that left no room for conversation. "I need you to switch seats." No introduction, no explanation, just a command. Maya blinked, unsure if she heard him correctly. She closed her book with a careful hand and looked up at him fully. "Sorry, what was that?" "I said I need the window seat for my son," he replied. His voice was firm, confident, the kind of tone people use when they assume no one will argue with them. "He gets anxious during flights. He needs to sit by the window." Maya let a second pass. She wanted to be sure she understood everything before she responded. "I'm sorry," she said gently, "but I paid extra for this seat." The man's jaw tightened. He did not expect resistance. Maya could tell almost immediately. This was a man who was used to getting what he wanted. People probably said yes before he even finished asking. He carried himself like rules didn't apply to him, like courtesy was optional and inconvenience was beneath him. He exhaled sharply. "He's a child," he said, slower this time, as if she had somehow missed that detail. "Surely you understand." Maya glanced at the boy. His small fingers squeezed the dinosaur tightly. His bottom lip trembled with nerves. Maya felt genuine sympathy for him. But she also knew that sympathy didn't erase the fact that she had paid for her seat. And it didn't erase the fact that this man had chosen to board a full flight without planning ahead. "I do understand," Maya replied calmly. "But this is the seat I purchased. I'm staying here." A flicker of disbelief crossed the man's face. Then something colder replaced it. He straightened his shoulders and raised his voice just enough for the people around him to hear. "Unbelievable," he muttered. "This is why traveling has become unbearable. No kindness left. No sense of basic decency." A few heads turned. Passengers shifted, suddenly curious. Maya felt a subtle heat rise in her cheeks. She hated that he was performing for an audience. He wasn't simply asking for a seat. He was trying to shame her into obedience. He wanted to make her look like the problem. He wanted witnesses. That pressure sat heavy on her chest, but she stayed firm. She looked at him evenly. The airline allowed everyone to choose their seats ahead of time. If the window was important, you could have booked one. His smile tightened into something sharp. "That's your answer?" he asked. "You're really refusing to help a child." Before Maya could answer, a familiar Navy uniform appeared beside them. A flight attendant had noticed the raised voices. The woman looked to be in her early 50s. Her name tag read Carla Brooks. She had the kind of steady presence that made people instinctively lower their voices. Her eyes were alert but calm, taking in every detail with practiced efficiency. "Is there an issue here?" she asked. The man cut in immediately. "Yes. She won't move so my son can have the window seat." Carla turned to Maya. "Is this your assigned seat?" "Yes," Maya said. "I booked it." Carla nodded once, then looked back at the man. "She has the seat listed on her ticket." He exhaled in frustration. "I'm asking you to help. Surely there's something you can do. Customer service should mean something." Carla kept her voice steady. Customer service does not mean forcing another passenger to give up the seat they paid for. The man's face darkened. Losing control wasn't an option he tolerated easily. "We're talking about a child," he repeated. A little bit of compassion would go a long way. Maya felt the tension thicken around them. More passengers were listening now. Some looked sympathetic toward her. Others avoided eye contact altogether, not wanting to get involved. The cabin felt tight, as if the air itself was waiting to see what would happen next. Carla stood her ground. "If you need a window seat, I can check if any are available. But I will not ask her to move." The man's eyes narrowed. He turned back to Maya with a gaze that held a quiet threat. "You really won't move for a kid?" Maya met his eyes without hesitation. "I paid for this seat. I'm staying here." He let out a harsh laugh, and the confrontation was far from over, because in the next moment, he made sure the entire plane heard his anger. And that was only the beginning. The man shook his head and let out a loud, pointed sigh, making sure half the cabin could hear him. His voice rose with practiced outrage. This is what the world has turned into. People being selfish for no reason. A grown woman refusing to help a child. Incredible. Passengers began shifting in their seats. Some glanced toward Maya with curiosity. Others pretended not to notice, uncomfortable with the tension building in the aisle. The boy tugged gently at his father's sleeve, as if wishing the moment would disappear, but the man didn't even look at him. Maya stayed still. Her heart beat a little faster, but she refused to shrink. She had learned long ago that people like him didn't back down when you looked uncertain. They pushed harder. Carla stepped closer to Maya, placing herself between the two of them in a subtle but protective way. "Sir," she said firmly, "this conversation is over. Please take your assigned seat." The man's jaw clenched. He didn't move. Instead, he scanned the nearby passengers, as if searching for someone to take his side. "You're all seeing this, right?" he said. "This is the kind of attitude everyone's dealing with now. No compassion, no understanding, no willingness to inconvenience themselves for a few minutes." A man sitting 2 rows back lowered his newspaper and spoke in a steady tone. "She paid for that seat," he said. "Let her sit in it." The father shot him a sharp glare, but said nothing. He looked back at Maya, and she could see the frustration simmering beneath his controlled expression. Carla didn't wait for his next move. "Sir," she said, "I'm going to ask you one more time to return to your assigned seat." His lips pressed into a flat line. He whispered something under his breath, too quiet for most to hear, but not quiet enough for the bitter tone to be missed. Maya didn't catch the whole phrase. Carla did. Her posture changed instantly. The soft professionalism she carried slipped away, and something colder took its place. Her voice dropped to a level that carried through the row without needing to be loud. "I suggest you choose your next words very carefully." The man stiffened, but instead of backing down, he doubled down. "I find it interesting," he said louder, "that she gets protected like this. Anyone else would have been told to move." A ripple of discomfort passed through the passengers. Maya felt a familiar pinch in her gut. She had heard comments like that before. She knew exactly what it meant. Carla knew too. Before she could respond, another voice came from the row behind her. She said no. A woman said, "No means no. You don't get to demand what you didn't pay for." Carla nodded slightly, acknowledging the support, but kept her eyes locked on the man. "Take your seat," she said finally. "Now." The father let out a harsh breath. His son tugged his sleeve again, whispering something too soft to make out. For a moment, Maya thought he might walk away. He didn't. Instead, he leaned down toward her just enough that she could hear him. "You must be very proud of yourself," he muttered. Before Maya could react, Carla stepped between them again with a sharp command. Sir, step away from her seat. A new tension rolled through the cabin. People sat up straighter. Someone quietly put away their phone. You could feel the air shifting, heavy and waiting. And then another flight attendant appeared. A tall man with a calm but imposing presence. His badge read Eric Lane. He stood beside Carla with a quiet authority that changed everything. Is there a problem? He asked. Carla didn't break eye contact with the father. I was asking this passenger to return to his assigned seat. Eric turned to the man, his voice even and firm. Sir, please return to your seat immediately, or we will need to escalate this with the captain. The man swallowed hard. He wasn't expecting backup to arrive so fast. Maya saw it happen. The shift. The small crack in his confidence. But he still wasn't willing to let go. You know what? He snapped. Fine. Keep the seat. I wouldn't want my son near someone like you anyway. The insult dropped like a stone between them. Carla's expression hardened into something unmistakable. That is enough, she said sharply. Collect your things and move to your seat right now. The father stared at her, speechless. His son looked down at his shoes. For a moment, it looked like the man might argue again. But Eric stepped forward, his stance quiet but unmistakably firm. Sir, he said, this is your final warning. Something in the man's posture loosened. Defeat wasn't in his nature, but consequences were. He grabbed his son's hand, turned without another word, and walked stiffly down the aisle toward his assigned seat. The moment he sat down, half the cabin exhaled in relief. But the story wasn't done. Not even close. Because anger like his doesn't disappear. It waits. It simmers. And soon, the next escalation would make everything that happened so far look small. The cabin began to settle, but the tension didn't fade from Maya's body. Even with the man seated 4 rows ahead, she could feel the anger rolling off him like heat. She tried to breathe steadily. She tried to go back to her book. She tried to convince herself the worst was over. But her instincts whispered otherwise. A woman across the aisle leaned slightly toward her. You handled that well, she said quietly. Most people would have given up just to avoid the drama. Maya gave a small nod. Thank you. What she didn't say was that a part of her had wanted to give up. There had been a moment where she felt the pressure pushing down on her like a weight. But she knew giving up wouldn't have made anything better. It would only have taught people like him that they could steamroll anyone who stayed quiet. She turned toward the window again, letting her thoughts settle. Then movement caught her eye. The man stood up, slowly, deliberately, against every instruction he had just been given. A nearby flight attendant noticed immediately. Sir, she said quickly, you need to remain seated. He ignored her. He didn't look at his son. He didn't glance at the seatbelt sign. He walked straight down the aisle toward Maya with a controlled stride that made several passengers straighten in their seats. Maya felt her pulse jump. She stayed still, shoulders tight, eyes steady. He stopped right beside her row. His hand gripped the top of the seat in front of her as he leaned just slightly closer. You think you did something brave back there, he said, his voice low enough for only a few people to hear. But all you did was cause trouble. Maya didn't answer. She didn't trust her voice to stay calm if she did. He continued. You sit here acting like you're the victim, but you know exactly what this is. You just love playing innocent. Her fingers curled against the armrest. Not from fear, from anger, because she understood perfectly well what he was insinuating. And he knew she understood. Before she could speak, Carla's voice cut through the aisle again, sharper than before. Sir, step away from her seat now. This time the entire row looked up, but he didn't move. Eric arrived a second later, his expression unreadable, but his presence unmistakably firm. Sir, return to your seat immediately, he said. If you refuse, we will have no choice but to remove you from the flight. The man looked from Carla to Eric. His jaw flexed. His irritation deepened into something dangerous. I haven't even raised my voice, he said. I'm just talking. You approached her after being told not to, Eric replied. Return to your seat. For the first time, uncertainty flickered in the man's eyes. But uncertainty was not surrender. He gave Maya one last look, full of disdain, and muttered something under his breath. Then he walked back to his row, shoulders tight, steps heavy. Maya let out a slow breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Carla turned to her. "Are you all right?" she asked. "Yes," Maya said. "I'm fine," even though her hands were still trembling at the edges. Carla nodded once, then exchanged a quick glance with Eric. It wasn't a glance of reassurance. It was a glance of preparation, as if both of them knew something else was coming. And they were right, because the moment Eric stepped back toward the front of the plane, the man made the biggest mistake of the day. He muttered one more comment. Soft, but not soft enough. Carla's head snapped around instantly. Eric heard it too. He froze mid-step. The passengers in the nearby rows didn't hear the exact words, but they heard enough to recognize venom in the tone. Eric didn't hesitate. He lifted his radio. "Captain, we have a developing situation with a non-compliant passenger." Maya felt the entire cabin shift. People leaned forward. Others whispered. The hum of the air vents seemed louder than before. Within seconds, the captain's voice crackled through Eric's radio. "Hold the passenger at the front. We'll coordinate with ground staff." Eric moved back toward the man with controlled steps. Carla followed. The boy watched them approach with wide, afraid eyes, clutching his toy tighter. Maya's chest tightened for him. None of this was his fault. Eric stopped at the man's row. "Sir," he said calmly, "I need you to gather your belongings and step into the jet bridge." The man didn't move. "Sir," Carla repeated, her voice firm, "you must comply." His hands gripped the armrests. His face turned a deep shade of red. He looked at the window, then the ceiling, then the aisle. He was cornered and he knew it. Eric leaned in slightly. "If you refuse, airport security will remove you." It was only then that the man's resolve cracked. Slowly, painfully, he unbuckled his seatbelt. His movements were tight, filled with humiliation, anger, and disbelief. He stood, grabbed his bag, and for a moment looked like he might say something to Maya. His expression twisted into something bitter. But instead he shook his head and walked toward the front of the plane, guided by Eric and Carla. The cabin stayed silent until he disappeared around the corner. Then a wave of whispers spread through the rows. A man near Maya let out a quiet huff. "Should have done that 10 minutes ago." A woman across from her nodded. Some people only understand consequences. But Maya didn't gloat, didn't smile, didn't even relax yet, because she knew something very few people ever admit. No matter how justified it is, conflict like this never leaves you feeling victorious. It leaves you tired, worn down, drained in places you didn't expect. And this flight wasn't even in the air yet. The silence that followed felt heavy. Not peaceful, not relieved, just heavy. The kind of quiet that settles after a storm, but still carries the memory of thunder. Maya leaned back in her seat, letting her spine press into the cushion. Her heartbeat slowed, but the tension in her shoulders refused to loosen. She wasn't afraid. She wasn't shaken in the way the man had hoped. But she was tired. Tired in a way that settled deep. The woman across the aisle gave her a small nod of reassurance. "It's over now," she said. Maya gave a faint smile. "I hope so." But she didn't fully believe it. Not yet. As passengers settled again, the flight attendants moved through the cabin, checking seat belts, guiding stragglers, and completing the pre-departure routine. Everything looked normal, yet the air still carried a residual charge, like everyone was waiting for another spark. Maya glanced toward the front. She saw Carla and Eric standing near the jet bridge entrance, speaking quietly with a member of the ground staff. Their tones were professional, controlled, but Maya could tell from their postures that tensions were still high. The little boy, the man's son, sat alone now. He hugged his dinosaur tightly, his small frame stiff with confusion. Every few seconds, he glanced toward the front of the plane as if waiting for his father to return. When he realized he wouldn't, his shoulders sagged. Maya felt a pull of empathy. Not for the man, but for the child caught in his wake. A flight attendant approached the boy gently, knelt beside him, and whispered something reassuring. He nodded slowly, though his eyes stayed fixed on the empty aisle. It wasn't fair that he had to witness all this, but fairness had never been part of his father's priorities. As the attendant guided him to a new seat closer to the front, Maya let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Maybe now the flight would finally settle. But then something unexpected happened. Carla returned to Maya's row. She leaned in, her tone softer than before. "I just want to check on you," she said. "This kind of situation can be stressful for anyone." Maya nodded. "I'm all right. Thank you." "Good," Carla said. "And just so you know, you handled everything with patience. Not everyone would stay calm under pressure like that." Maya appreciated the words more than she expected. She nodded again, offering a small but steady smile. Then Carla added something quieter. "And if anything else happens during the flight, anything at all, let me know." Maya understood the meaning behind that. The man was gone, but the aftershock of his actions lingered. Conflict leaves echoes, and not everyone lets go of anger once they step off a plane. Carla walked away to assist another passenger, leaving Maya to settle back into her seat. The hum of engines deepened as the plane prepared for takeoff. For a moment, everything felt normal again. Then a soft voice from behind her spoke. "People like him always think they're in the right." Maya turned slightly to see the man who had spoken earlier, the one reading the newspaper. He lowered it again and gave a knowing nod. "You did the right thing," he said. "Most folks wouldn't stand their ground. They'd fold under pressure so he could feel powerful. But you didn't." "Thank you," Maya said. He shrugged gently. Some people need to hear no for the first time in their lives. Maya let that settle, because she knew he wasn't wrong. Some people grow so used to being accommodated that they forget others have a right to boundaries. As the flight attendants made their final checks, Maya placed her book in her lap again, though she didn't open it. Her thoughts were still too scattered to focus on words. The plane began to taxi. The engine rumbled beneath her feet. The ground trembled as they moved toward the runway. Passengers leaned back. Seat belts tightened. The cabin filled with that familiar moment of anticipation before takeoff. Maya closed her eyes for a second and exhaled. Finally, things are calming down. Or so she believed. Because just as the plane began its slow turn toward the runway, a soft chime came through the intercom. A flight attendant answered a call from the front. Her eyebrows lifted. Her posture changed. She whispered something to another attendant before hurrying toward Carla. Maya watched the exchange. Their faces tightened with concern. Not panic, not fear, but concern. The kind of concern that only comes when something unexpected has just happened. And the moment Carla picked up the intercom, Maya felt the shift. "Ladies and gentlemen," Carla said with a measured tone, "please remain seated. We will be delaying our departure for a few minutes." Whispers spread instantly. "What's going on? Is something wrong? Is there another issue?" The woman across the aisle glanced at Maya with a nervous expression. "What now?" Maya didn't answer. She didn't know, but the weight in her stomach returned, because she could tell by the tension in Carla's voice. Something wasn't over yet. Carla stayed at the front for several seconds, speaking quietly to someone just out of view. Maya leaned forward slightly, unable to hear the words, but catching the tension in every movement. Eric appeared beside Carla, his posture alert. The two exchanged a short, strained conversation. Then both looked toward the jet bridge, as if expecting someone to appear. And when a figure finally stepped inside the cabin doorway, a wave of uneasy silence swept through the plane. It wasn't the man. It wasn't security. It was the captain. A captain stepping into the cabin before takeoff was never a casual thing. Maya could feel the air tighten. Passengers froze mid-whisper. Even the little boy, seated far ahead, lifted his head in confusion. The captain nodded to Carla and Eric before addressing the front rows in a calm, steady voice that traveled easily through the quiet cabin. "We're handling a situation that requires a final review," he said. "Thank you for your patience." He didn't explain. He didn't need to. Everyone knew exactly what this was about. Carla approached Maya again. Her voice was low, almost apologetic. "I just want to assure you we're finalizing something," she said. "Everything will be resolved shortly." Maya nodded, though her heartbeat had begun to pick up again. She wasn't in trouble, and she knew that. But the weight of being involved at all still pressed against her chest. Passengers began murmuring again. Is that guy still around? Did he refuse to leave? Are they bringing him back? The last question sent a cold shiver down Maya's spine. She didn't want to imagine the chaos that would cause. Before the thought could spiral, Eric walked briskly past her row and moved toward the front. Seconds later, 3 members of airport security stepped through the cabin door. Now the murmurs grew louder. Security presence changed the mood instantly. Even passengers who had remained neutral earlier straightened in their seats, sensing the seriousness of the situation. Eric guided the officers out of sight, just inside the jet bridge. Their voices were muffled, but Maya caught enough to piece together what was happening. The man had refused to leave the boarding area. He was outside the plane arguing with staff. He was demanding to be let back on. Maya's stomach twisted, not because she feared him physically, but because she knew exactly what kind of person tried to claw his way back into a situation after being removed. People who believed rules applied to everyone except themselves. People who refused responsibility. People who wanted to punish whoever had stood up to them. Carla returned to the intercom again. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your continued patience. Please remain seated." The pause before she added the next sentence held the weight of everything still happening outside. "We are resolving the matter now." More footsteps echoed near the front. The boy shifted in his seat again, watching security officers move. His small shoulders slumped deeper, as if bracing himself all over again. Maya's heart ached for him. The boy didn't deserve any part of this. He deserved a father who didn't use him as leverage. A father who didn't turn him into a prop for attention or sympathy. Minutes passed. 1, 2, 5. The cabin felt suspended in time. Then Eric reappeared, walking back into the cabin slowly, his expression calmer now. Security followed behind him briefly before stepping away through the jet bridge. Carla lifted the intercom once more. "Thank you for your patience. We're ready for departure." A collective exhale rippled through the plane. Passengers slumped back into their seats. Some chuckled softly in relief. Others shook their heads at the absurdity of what they had just witnessed. The man was gone for good. Only now did Maya feel her shoulders ease. The pressure in her chest loosened. She let out a slow breath and finally leaned fully into her seat. The woman across the aisle looked at her with gentle eyes. "That could have gone very differently," she said. Maya nodded. "I know. What he did wasn't right," the woman added. "And you never raised your voice. You never lost control. You didn't let him push you." Maya swallowed. She didn't feel triumphant. She didn't feel proud. She felt something quieter. Something heavy but strong. Because she knew the truth. It takes strength to stand your ground. But it takes even more strength to do it calmly. The engines roared, and the plane began rolling toward the runway. Passengers settled once more as the wings cut through the early light outside. As they accelerated for takeoff, Maya looked out the window, watching the ground blur into motion. Only then did she allow the full weight of the day to settle in her mind. Not with fear, not with regret, with clarity. She had not moved. She had not bowed her head. She had not let someone else decide her worth. And that mattered, because the world is full of people who expect others to shrink to make room for them. People who rely on pressure, on entitlement, on loud voices and bitter words to get what they want. And sometimes saying no is not an act of stubbornness. It is an act of survival, an act of dignity, an act of self-respect. As the plane lifted into the sky, Maya felt the clouds slide past her window. The world below shrank, but something inside her grew. She didn't need to win. She just needed to stay rooted. And staying in her seat had been enough. If you've ever seen someone push past their limits, or if you've ever had to hold your ground when it wasn't easy, you know exactly how moments like this feel. They linger. They shape you. And they remind you that your voice matters even in the smallest spaces. Because respect is not something you earn by being loud or demanding. Respect is something you uphold by knowing your worth and refusing to step aside when someone tries to take it from you.